All right. Hello, everybody. I've heard some of you talking, and I'm glad that you're able to get on and and even see each other. If you want to leave it so that you can I'm Jill Slaven. I'm the presenter today. As you can see, I'm an RN, but also a certified diabetes care and education specialist. And so we were going to mute everybody just so that, because it's being recorded. So if you don't want, my understanding is if you don't want your picture on the recording, that you might want to stop like letting your picture be seen. So that's up to you. And we have quite a few other people that were coming on, so we were going to give them a few more minutes to get to be able to jump on, maybe because of lunch is taking a little bit of time. But we'll go ahead and we can go ahead and get started. They can jump on whenever they can. So what we're hoping is that that you will, if you have a question or a concern or want to add something, just send it through the chat box. And you just type it in and hit enter, and it'll show up on my screen, and we'll get to it when we can, whenever there's a break or in the presentation or at the end. So just go ahead and add that anytime. If you want to add something, put it through the chat box. And we've been talking about possibly opening it up so we actually can have a conversation or a group meeting going, and we're still working on that. At this time, though, this is our second virtual diabetes group meeting. And what we're doing here at Valley Professionals is, once it's finished, our marketing team is putting it on our website, so you can always go back and rewatch it or reference it if you need to. And we used to meet in person at Valley Professionals' Clinton office for a diabetic group, and we had the best time, and we'd have a great discussion. So we really missed that. But because of COVID, of course, we stopped meeting in person, and now we're starting to try to do something different. So we're going to see how this works. We're going to kind of just do a little bit at a time, adding, like I said, whether we go ahead and have a group discussion, instead of just me presenting. We're going to let us know if that's something you would be interested in, I guess. Okay, so the reason why we chose what can I eat is because this is the #1 question that it seems like everybody asks me. As a diabetic educator, all of our patients at Valley are usually referred to me at some point from their provider for education. And this is almost the first thing everybody always asks: what can I eat? And I'm kind of glad they asked that, because the 7 self-care behaviors from the American Association of Diabetic Educators, the AADE, one of those 7s is healthy eating. So I'm always glad when someone asks that question, because it's like, I can say, this is check one of the things that the AADE says we should cover. And they want us to cover it because they found through research that when a person with diabetes begins to learn about these 7 self-care behaviors and makes changes in these areas, blood sugar improves. So today we're going to cover or review the self-care behavior of healthy eating. So I have that little piece of the pie kind of out of the pie. That's what we're going to focus on this time. Last time we focused on monitoring. We talked a lot about continuous glucose monitors. And if you're interested in that and you weren't able to attend that meeting, again, that should be archived on our website so that you could go back, and if you want to learn more about continuous glucose monitors, the information's there. And then I'm always a resource that you could call and talk to also. But today it's all about healthy eating. And that question that everyone asks, what can I eat? So the answer everyone wants to hear is, you can eat anything you want. And I don't know if this surprises you, but it did about 5 years ago, when I actually started doing all of the work that it took to become a certified diabetic educator. And this was one of the things that the American Association of Diabetes, the American Diabetes Association, the ADA, actually says, is that you can eat anything you want. They don't limit what you can and can't eat. And I don't know, maybe, have you ever experienced, I wonder if you've experienced this, I've experienced this, someone else has told you, you can't have that, or you shouldn't be eating that dessert. And I can remember even my great-grandmother many years ago being told by my grandmother, her daughter, you can't have that, or you can eat this, but you can't have that. And so that was my first experience with diabetes. It seemed like I was, someone was limited to what they could eat and couldn't eat, but that's not true. So the American Diabetes Association states, and that's again the ADA, so I may call them the ADA at times as I'm talking about the association, but they state that there is not one diet or meal plan that works for everyone with diabetes. The American Diabetes Association doesn't specify recommended amounts of carbohydrates, protein, or fats even. They don't give out specifics, because what works for some people doesn't always work for everybody else. When people eat identical foods, they actually can have a different blood sugar reaction. If we were to put a continuous glucose monitor on everybody or on two different people and have them eat certain foods, you would see a different spike, possibly no spike in their blood sugar. So the American Diabetes Association doesn't specify what you can and can't eat. They don't, that's not what their job is. That they don't think anyone should actually do that. Everyone has a different reaction. I can remember as we met with the diabetic group, when we actually met as a group, I would have patient participants tell me they could eat a certain pizza from a certain place in town, but they couldn't eat pizza from another place. Some people could eat popcorn in the evenings for a snack. It did not affect their blood sugar the next morning. Some people said they could not eat popcorn. So that goes back to what the ADA is saying, is that everybody's body reacts different. So they're not going to specifically tell someone what they can and can't have. However, the ADA does offer recommendations. So if you're wondering, what can I eat after being diagnosed with diabetes or even pre-diabetes, these are three of the, I like to call them eating plans instead of diets, but some of them actually have that word, four-letter word diet with them. These are three that they actually do recommend. One is the DASH diet, which is stands for Dietary Approaches to Stop Hypertension. If you have any experience with a cardiologist, they may have suggested that you start the DASH diet. And the Mediterranean diet is one also that the ADA might recommend, and then plant-based diets. And we are going to review all three of these as just options for somebody who's trying to figure out, what can I eat? I first want to look at the My Plate. This is what we usually use when a patient comes in for education. We use it as a guideline, kind of as someone to point out, what are you eating in these food groups? And, you know, most of the time I like the ADA and the AADE, the Diabetes Associations, will say they really would like half your plate to be all the non-starchy vegetables with some fruit. For instance, like for breakfast, if you don't want to eat vegetables for breakfast, you know, and replace that with fruits. Have your fruits for a snack in between meals. But then a fourth of your plate is a grain and a fourth is a protein, give or take a little bit there. And then they offer the dairy as an option too. But this is the general My Plate that we use when we do education. And I just show you this because as we look at the three eating plans we just talked about, the DASH diet, the Mediterranean diet, and then just plant-based diets, you're going to see a lot, almost the same type of plate in front of you. So let's look at the DASH diet first. Like I said, you may have experience with the DASH diet if you have any dealings with a cardiologist. And I know a lot of you already know this, that the DASH diet is wanting you to limit your sodium intake. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But I specifically wanted you to look at an example of the plate that they would suggest for a DASH diet. You can see a bunch of vegetables. You can see the fruit. You can see the protein, and you can see the whole grains. Again, it looks a lot like the My Plate we just looked at. And they suggest low-fat dairy. So if it's a DASH diet, they are going to definitely focus on low fat. And so when it comes to the meat, you know, the protein, they're going to want you to choose chicken or turkey over red meat because of the less fat, the healthier fats. They're going to want you to choose low fat dairy over like whole milk because of the fat content. And then again, you're going to also be watching sodium content also. So let's look at that on the next slide. So the DASH is a flexible and balanced eating plan that helps create a heart-healthy eating plan for your life, for your style for your life. It requires no special foods and instead just provides daily and weekly nutritional goals. You know, the main plan is that you'll eat a lot of vegetables, you'll have fruits, and you'll have whole grains. You want to try to include fat-free or low-fat dairy products. You want to include fish. You want to include chicken or poultry, chicken or turkey. Beans are fine, nuts, and vegetable oils. You want to limit foods that are high in saturated fat, such as fatty meats, full-fat dairy products, and tropical oils like coconut, palm kernel, and palm oil. So you know, a lot of times those saturated fats are we talk about this too as we meet with diabetes or for education for diabetes, and the things kind of on the inside of the grocery store. If you think about the outside of the grocery store where your meats are, your your vegetables, your produce, sometimes the milk and eggs are on the outside of the store. And then on the inside, you have your prepackaged things like chips and cookies and crackers. That's where you're going to find your saturated fats more often, or in the middle of the store, and not so much on the outside. Of course, red meat would be in that saturated fat, and they want you to limit that. And they'd rather you try to eat, the chicken, poultry, or fish. And then, of course, with the DASH diet, they want you to limit your sugar sweetened beverages and sweets in general. Doesn't say you can't have it, but it says limited. The one above it, it doesn't say you can't have saturated fat or those oils. It says limit those foods. So again, that's why the American Diabetes Association would say the DASH diet is an okay diet, because it's more or less saying what they're saying when you want to limit some of these foods that aren't the healthiest for you. Whether you're been diagnosed with diabetes or not, these type of foods are not the healthiest for any of us. So the DASH diet does talk about or limit sodium. And it's, from what I found, in the past, what I've understood is that 2,300 milligrams of sodium daily is what they would suggest. However, I know I've heard in the last few years, that's why I wish we actually had this time where we could discuss this. But if any of you know the specifics, go ahead and put it in the chat. But I thought that was reduced to 1,700 milligrams a daily, maybe even less. But, with watching your sodium, I think what becomes difficult with this, we're trying to figure out what can I eat, what can't I eat. You have to measure. And so if it's easy enough, if you have a food label, you can look on the back of the label, you can see how much sodium is in it, and you can just add up your milligrams, all day long by what's on the food label. However, that's easy enough said, but not so much easy done when you actually want to add some salt to the eggs that you're cooking. And then you have to somehow figure out, okay, well, how many milligrams is this? So even with 2,300 milligrams, that is like less than a teaspoon. It's like I think it's less than 3/4 of a teaspoon even of salt if you were going to measure it out. So with that said, that kind of becomes cumbersome to try and figure out how much sodium am I eating. I think the main thing to keep in mind is, try not to add, if you're following the DASH diet, try not to add extra salt, because you're going to get the salt in those foods that are prepackaged, or if you go out to eat, restaurants will use salt, and you can ask them to not add the salt. But if you forget to do that, you're going to get some sodium in that meal also. So if you choose to follow the DASH diet, when you're trying to figure out, what should I eat to help manage my blood sugar, it's important to choose foods that are low in saturated fats and trans fats. You want the foods to be rich in potassium, calcium, magnesium, fiber, and protein, and you want to lower your sodium. So all of those things that we just mentioned can be found on the food label on prepackaged foods. And then some of the others you may just have, and that's something we could do in another presentation, but make to do just a little bit of a research, like a list of foods that are trans fats. I can tell you trans fats, that's where your pie crust is, anything with lard in it, your cookies, your crackers. Again, think of all the things at a store that are in the middle of the store, not so much those things on the outside. Your saturated fats, your red meats. I think butter has saturated fat. So again, doing a quick Google search, you'll find a list of those things. And then the foods that are rich in potassium, calcium, magnesium, fiber, and protein. Again, do a list, but I'm thinking, or do a search, I'm thinking, nuts, almonds, of course, protein, you're going to get your turkey, your chicken. And then lower in sodium is just really going to be you kind of paying more attention and trying to reduce or get rid of using salt at all, added salt, and then really paying attention to anything you eat that's already packaged, how many milligrams are in it, and doing a daily total. All right, so that's the DASH diet. The next diet that the ADA said would be a good choice is the Mediterranean diet. And if you look on this screen, you can see all kinds of again, fruits, vegetables, you got your fish. So it's not looking a whole lot different than what, and I apologize for this being blurry. It wasn't blurry on my other screen. So I'll kind of just go through this plate. Again, an example of what the Mediterranean plate would look like. You can see half of that plate is vegetables, maybe some fruits added in. A fourth of the plate, or maybe a little bit more, are your grains and your beans. And then a fourth of the plate, maybe a little bit less than a fourth, is your protein, or in this case, the Mediterranean eating plan or diet really does focus a lot more on fish. So of course, grilled salmon. They have the extra added fruit on a serving of its own, and then they include water instead of a dairy product. So that's something to keep in mind, a little bit different on the Mediterranean. But again, overall, you're getting a healthy diet no matter what, if you've been diagnosed with diabetes, pre-diabetes, or none of those of the above, and you just want to eat healthy, this is a good choice for anybody. I like how they put the Mediterranean diet in the form of the pyramid, kind of like what the USDA did for us in a pyramid of what you should eat and kind of how many servings. But I like how they did this, because if you look at the very bottom of this pyramid, it's practiced daily. So every day, if you're following like a Mediterranean diet, physical activity and enjoying meals. So I like that, because it is all about sitting down and enjoying the food that you eat. And that's when the ADA said, we're not going to tell someone what they can and can't have. They want you to enjoy your meals. They want you to enjoy time with family and friends as you eat those meals. And then enjoy daily. They want whole grain in the Mediterranean diet, whole grains, vegetables, fruits, beans, and of course, herbs, spices, and healthy fats. Healthy fats are like olives. You've heard of olive oil being a healthy fat. That would be considered a healthy fat. Enjoy 3 or more times per week your fish that are rich in omega-3s. And 1 to 2 times a week, you can enjoy poultry, eggs, and dairy. So you can notice that if you remember that plate that we just looked at, they had water for the drink, and yet the DASH diet had milk, low fat milk, but they had milk. So this one's putting milk a little bit further away from what you need daily, but instead just limit that to 1 to 2 times a week. And then it's not that you can't have it, but again, on the very top of that, the very top of the pyramid, limit consumption of red meat and sweets. So they have red meat there, and they have some ice cream. So just gives you kind of a visual of what should I do the most throughout the week, and what should I limit. And again, that reminds me a lot of the My Plate, reminds me of the DASH diet. Not a whole lot of difference. So the plant-based diet, or a plant-based plan, you may have thought, oh, this is probably going to be like vegetarian. And in some sense, it is. But in the next slide, there's a chart that kind of compares a few things. I liked it. But just as a quick looking at the plate, you're not going to see a whole lot difference. You've got veggies, you've got fruits, you've got whole grains, and you have beans. So what you're missing here is, of course, meat, the actual meat. And they're getting their protein from their beans and other things. But the one thing they actually added that no one else really added, or the tubers, or your sweet potatoes, yams, carrots, beets, etc. So this is what a plant-based diet would look like. And again, it's a healthy thing, because you're getting your vitamins, your minerals from all of your fruits and vegetables. You're getting your protein, your fiber from the vegetables, fruit, proteins, and beans, your whole grains. So again, a complete balanced diet is really what you're getting with the plant-based diet, if you can do without the meat. So this is what I kind of liked. It did compare plant-based versus vegan, and then also whole food plant-based diet. So I was looking at the plant-based diet. I was surprised that if you go down in the middle column and you go down to highly processed foods, I was surprised to see the check mark there. And then I looked over to the column that's whole food plant-based diet. And I'm like, okay, that makes sense. They really want you to limit, if you're doing a whole food plant-based diet, they want you to limit highly processed foods, which doesn't surprise me. But anyway, it kind of gives you an idea. Of course, a vegan is going to get rid of meat and poultry, seafood, eggs, and dairy products. The plant-based, the whole food plant-based, both, it's not that you can't have it. They want you to try to avoid it. And then then you can see the oils, highly processed foods, whole grains, fruit and vegetables, and beans are okay, check mark, in both the vegan and the plant-based. But in the whole food, again, they would want you to limit or avoid oils and highly processed foods. So again, it just gives you kind of an idea if you were wondering, how is plant-based compared to like being vegan? And then the whole food plant-based is really just limiting the highly processed foods and the oils. Again, another healthy way of focusing your diet if you're wanting to, again, answer that question, what is it that I can eat? Because oftentimes this is what happens. We go to the store and we have all of these different labels looking at us, and we have to read them all, and we're, whole grain, organic wheat, real honey, USDA approved, supports your immunity, fat-free, sugar-free. It's like, what do you choose? What do we do with all of this? It can get confusing with all of this advertisement, and it is confusing. They go, what is actually healthy and what's not healthy? So really, to me, to get started is really the main thing. Take that first step. And the first step can be simple. It doesn't have to be cleaning out all of your cabinets and starting completely over, but just take that first step and think about, what about the size of your plate? Think about the serving sizes that you're eating, and think about your food choices. So let's take that first one, thinking about the size of your plate. You know, I like this picture because in the 1960s, the size of the dinner plate, or the plates that we ate off of, were 8.5 inches. So every plate that I showed you in that one that was called the My Plate is a 9-inch plate. So they're giving you even a half an inch larger than what we got in the 1960s. You know, sometimes we wonder why we have diabetes. You know, there's so many people with diabetes these days, or why do we have so many people that are overweight or unhealthy or whatever? We got to start looking about, what did we used to do and what are we doing these days? How did we make a difference in, you know, weight, health, diabetes? Why is it increasing? So in the 1960s, the dinner plate was about 8.5 to 9 inches, and it held about 800 calories. In the 1980s, the dinner plate got a little larger to 10 inches. It held about 1,000 calories. In the 2000s, it went to 11 inches, and it holds about 1,600 calories. And in 2009, 12-inch dinner plates started coming out. They hold about 1,900 calories. And I like how each one of them, after the 8.5-inch, gave you the percent of increase in calories. I think the 12-inch one is incorrect, because each time it's gone up to 20%, the 11-inch went up to 35%, and the 12-inch, that's probably 45 or 55%. But the point, from what we were in the 1960s. But the point is this: the larger the plates have gotten, the more calories that are on that plate, because we're filling that plate up. And I think this picture kind of shows that. If you looked at this, the portion size illusion, which plate contains the most food? A lot of times you might look at it and think, well, it's that small plate. Actually, when I was doing this, if I covered the first 2 plates, I would look at that small plate and then that plate's full. I don't know if I can eat all that. But if I looked at the first plate with the same amount of food on it, but the larger plate, I would be thinking, why is that? Why, you know, I'm being deprived? Like, there's not enough food on that plate. It's hardly anything. So really, it's all about, what size of plate are you using? What size is the serving size that you're putting on that plate? And start looking at that. These are some of the first steps you can take without even making a huge difference in what it is you're eating, but maybe the amount that you're eating, or the size, you know, with the serving size, because of the plate that we are eating off of. Just go down one small plate from what you're eating on now. And then if you need to or can, maybe one more plate. I always tell everybody I meet with, you know, you can always go back for seconds. You can always go back for seconds. There's no, you know, you don't have to limit that. You can go back and have another serving, and then ask yourself, are you satisfied? So going on, I want to again just bring back what the My Plate's supposed to look like. And this is just our overall My Plate, the healthy plate that we usually follow and show everybody, hey, this is what you want to do as far as having half your plate fruits and vegetables, having a healthy low-fat protein, whether it's fish or chicken or turkey, unless you went with the plant-based diet, and then adding some kind of grain it is an option also. So as we look at all 3 of those eating plans, the DASH diet, the Mediterranean diet, and the plant-based diet, you know, what do they have in common? I mean, they have a lot in common if you look at these plates. Full of vegetables, full of healthy proteins, have some grains, you know, that's not a problem. And they're really a whole lot alike. So the ADA suggests or recommends these 3 diets. I called it a diet, eating plan, because they are full of really low sugar choices and healthy choices. So it's not really rocket science to figure out what can you eat. It's just kind of making maybe a few little changes here and there. And then as you get that new change under your belt, maybe looking for the next change, the next healthy thing you can add. However, while you're doing that research, I like to talk about how to find nutrition advice you can actually trust. because sometimes you can, again, all those labels that come in front of you, like what is the truth? What should I follow? What should I eat? What should I not eat? There are some things you can think about as you're looking into this and doing some research on your own. So red flags to look for as you're looking for nutrition advice: consider the intent of your source. So you jumped on today to our meeting. My intent is to help you to be here as a resource here at Valley Professionals, to give you some basic information for you to take and go on your own with it and do with it what you will. I'm not getting any kickback from the American Association of Diabetes Educators or the American Diabetes Association or from anybody. So I don't have any intent. My intent, I guess, is to help you and just to share some education. I'm not selling any products. So think about that as you're looking to buy something and you're advertising, or you're listening to an advertisement on the TV, or on a video that you're watching on your phone and on YouTube, and a video or a advertisement comes up. Are they selling you a product? Does the product promote a quick fix or make claims that are sound to be too good to be true? If so, they probably are too good to be true. Is the information being presented in a sensational or a clickbait manner? Are they saying, oh, here, click here to find out more? I'm always getting frustrated. I'm like, no, just tell me what it is that you want to tell me. I want it. It sounds interesting, but when they start saying click here or do this or go here for this discount, I start losing interest. Is the advice that they're giving based on research? And does it discuss the study, that the research, giving any details or links to the study? If it does, that means they're willing to share their information and they're not trying to hide anything. So these are just some red flags to look for when you start doing some research to find out what is healthy eating for you, where to go from here. And as you do the research, assemble a collection of the go-to trustworthy resources. So as you search for information, write them down, keep track of it, save it, bookmark it on your computer so you can go back to that site each time. Ask your doctor, your healthcare provider, where is a good place to go, a website that's good. Make an appointment with either me, a certified diabetes educator, or one of our care coordinators. Any one of us can help you with, what's healthy to eat, and we can help you kind of get motivated, and what we can do to help you keep motivated and keep on that healthy track. And so this is one site that I actually found, and it is the American Diabetes Association that put this up. It's called Diabetes Food Hub, and this is in the resources at the end of this presentation. I could only do screenshots right now, but what I wanted to point out was, if you are kind of lost and you're just like, I'm not sure what to make, what to eat, what sounds good, what doesn't sound good, this place is a free site. You were able to look around, but you couldn't get into everything unless I actually created an account, and I had to put in my name, my first name only, and an email. And I think it asked for my zip code, I think. And that was it. And so now I could get to everything. So and we'll see at the top here, there's choices. And the first one is, let's look through the recipes. So because this was Mediterranean zucchini and we talked about the Mediterranean diet, I thought, well, that sounds interesting. So that's what I chose. So on the next screen, this is what happens when you hover over the Mediterranean zucchini. It gives you the calories, it gives you the serving size, it gives you the carbs, the fats, the proteins. If you like all that information, it's there for you. But remember, the ADA, the American Diabetes Association, does not tell you that you have to limit or how many carbs to have, fat or protein or calories. But this one gives you all that. And so because I wanted to save it, the little star down there, the blue star, I clicked on it. And that saves it to my favorites. And it actually then saves it, I said to my favorites, but it saves it to my meal plan or to my favorites. So off to the right, you can see there is add recipes from your saved list. So it saves everything I clicked on in a list. And then this is the meal plan. So all I did was I actually drug, I guess is the correct word, that Mediterranean zucchini from that list over to dinner. I could have drug it and put it under lunch. I could have put it under breakfast if I wanted to. You can put it anywhere you want, but it's going to put it in your meal plan. And the thing I like about that is that not only does it put it in your meal plan, okay, but it makes a grocery list for you. So that's the main thing I liked about this, is that it makes a grocery list for me. So at the very end, I've got on the right-hand side, you can see it's got the Mediterranean zucchini, the only thing I chose. And over here on the left, then it starts with my grocery list. So it makes the list for me so that I can take that, print that off, take that with me and get exactly what I need to make this recipe. That is the Diabetes Food Hub. I just came across it as I was getting ready for this presentation. I mean, I think that it is, you know, it's a place to start, and it can be helpful if you're really trying to think of new things to try, or you're just really kind of stuck and you're not sure what to eat. But just keep in mind, like I said, the American Diabetes Association doesn't tell you you can't have something. So it's not that you can't have something, it's can you limit those serving sizes? Can you think about the size of your plate? So on this final slide, I have some of the resources I use. These are just some that I ran into that I thought would be helpful if you're interested in them. And it looks like somebody has a question of how many carbs should we be limited to? Again, remember the ADA does not limit you to carbs. We do have, if you are taking insulin based on how many carbs, then yeah, we need to be able to do some carb counting. Even Dr. Rico, the endocrinologist that I work with, he tells me that people sometimes eat 120 carbs per meal. I'm used to people maybe eating around 45 to 60. Every meal may be a little different for you. Again, there's no limit on how many carbs. Again, would we like you to limit? If you're going to follow the My Plate, and you're going to have half your plate of non-starchy vegetables, which will have hardly any carbohydrates in them, and you're going to eat a healthy protein of chicken or turkey, no carbs at all. If you eat that small little section of the My Plate with the corner of the plate being grains, that's where you're going to get some carbs, but you know, it depends on which one you choose. You know, so in reality, if you're following the My Plate, or you're following the Mediterranean, or any one of these, the DASH or the plant-based, you're going to be limiting your carbs to some extent anyway. Fruit is going to have a little, you know, few more carbs. So if you add that, then yeah, that can add carbs. But as far as a specific number, I'm going to follow what the ADA just said and say there is no specific number for how many carbs. We can talk more about that another time, but for right now, they're not going to specify out any kind of specific number that you have to follow. We have here at Valley Professionals, sometimes we'll use a sheet that actually, if a person's wanting to lose weight, we can specify out how active you are. The worksheet kind of works you through how active you are and how many carbohydrates you should have based on your activity level. But that's if you're trying to lose weight. If you're just trying to manage blood sugar, then that's when the American Diabetes Association is saying that they're not going to say how many carbohydrates you should have at each meal. One good thing, though, to keep in mind that the ADA might say, because it is helpful for blood sugar, is if you could have about the same amount of carbohydrates at every meal, that can help control blood sugar. So if you could have, you know, 60 carbs at each meal, that's better than having 120 carbs for breakfast and 20 carbs for lunch, and then, you know, 240 carbs for dinner. You can see with those numbers, as they go up, blood sugar is going to follow that number and go up. So you're going to have this mountain, peak, and valley situation going on. So if you could kind of spread those out throughout the day and have the same, almost the same amount at each meal, you're going to see a little bit improvement in blood sugar, as far as no spikes and no, you know, valleys, no lows. Well, not too low, but as far as actually telling you how many you have to have, that's really, if you're wanting to lose weight, that would be based on your activity level also. And we could cover that if you guys wanted to in another presentation. So if there's any more questions, I'm looking at the chat. I don't see too many others.
Jill, this is Debbie. I might just throw in a plug for our care coordinators here. As any of our patients may, you know, if they think, well, I just don't have time to come in, you know, every week or whatever, but I'd like to work with somebody. Our care coordinators are always available by phone to set up, you know, just a touch base by phone, just to see how you're doing for the week, or answer questions and be a resource for you. So they're available by telephone as well. So.
Yep, that's true. Every one of our sites, Valley Professionals, has a care coordinator or two maybe, and they are registered nurses. They've got experience in nutrition. We're not registered dietitians, but we know quite a bit about nutrition, and if we don't know it, then we'll talk to your provider about referring you to a registered dietitian. But for the most part, yes, every one of the care coordinators can sit down with you and help you. And like I said, mainly earlier I said this, but you know, if you need help with motivation, getting things organized, that's what we can, or more websites or information, just basic information, that's what we're here for. So any one of our sites, you just call the office and ask to talk to the care coordinator. Thank you, Debbie. Okay, well, if there's no more questions, we'll close this session out. But if you guys would add anything in there of what you'd like to cover as we have these virtual meetings, and then if you would like to have more ability so that we can actually have a, kind of a group conversation, where we'd really like to work on that, because I think you get I know from research it says you get a whole lot more from a meeting when there's participation from the group, not so much just, someone sharing the education with you, but that there's participation where we actually hear of your experiences. I think I would just encourage you, to not, when you run into people, because if they know you are diagnosed with diabetes or pre-diabetes, or even in, if you're trying to lose weight, in my case, you'll have people say, oh, you can't have that, or you shouldn't be eating that. That's not true. And whether you say something kindly to them, like, well, I learned the other day that the American Diabetes Association, you can throw that name around. They don't limit. They don't tell you that you can't have something. So don't live your life limiting it, but start thinking, what do I need to do to be healthy? And when you're working that way, you are going to possibly, in some sense, limit that sugar or those sweetened beverages or whatever. You're going to start paying more attention to your plate and what are the choices that you're making and what serving size. Keep in mind that picture with the 1960s plate and our plates now. There's no reason for us to have those large plates if the food on the 1960s plate, on the 9-inch or less plate, can fill you up and make you feel satisfied, then that's the answer. And always trying to be healthy just because it's good for everybody's, our overall health, is to eat the vegetables, fruit, and healthy proteins. So I would encourage you just to make sure you have that strength now that you've heard this, that you can refute that. Nobody can tell you can't have something. That's not what the ADA says. That's not what any diabetic group would say anymore. They want you to enjoy life and enjoy the food that you're eating. So. All right, well, we'll close out now, but like I said, if you have any other thing you'd like to add, you can always email or call the clinics, and we'll get it added to the next time we have a meeting. Thank you all for coming on and participating.